The gray market has shifted more in the last 18 months than it did in the 5 years before that. Models that were selling at significant premiums have come back to earth. Models that barely moved are now getting attention they never had before. And the conventional wisdom about which Rolex to buy, the advice that gets repeated across forums and watch groups without anyone checking whether it still applies, is now pointing people toward the wrong watches. This video covers the models that actually make sense to buy in 2026. Not the ones that make for the best Instagram content. The ones where the value case is real, the gray market pricing is genuinely favorable, and the watch itself holds up as something worth owning for the long term. If this kind of content is useful, subscribing to the channel helps a lot. Starting at number 6, the Explorer 1, reference 124270, is the most underappreciated watch in the current Rolex lineup, and it has been for the better part of 2 years. The retail price sits just under $10,000, depending on location. On the gray market right now, this watch is available at or below retail from reputable dealers, without a wait, without a purchasing history requirement, and without any of the authorized dealer dynamics that make getting certain references so frustrating. For context, the Explorer 1 is a 36mm steel watch on an oyster bracelet with a clean 369 dial, a manufacturer movement, and a Rolex case and bracelet finish that holds up to daily wear better than almost any other configuration in the lineup. It is a watch that does not need justification, and it is genuinely everyday. What makes it interesting right now is what the market has been doing around it. Sport references with ceramic bezels have commanded most of the attention and most of the premium. The Explorer 1 has no ceramic bezel, no date, no complications beyond the time, and that simplicity is exactly what makes it genuinely wearable every day without thinking about it. It is also a watch that looks better in person than in photos, which runs counter to what drives purchasing decisions in the current environment. The market discounts that. The buyer wearing it daily does not. Unworn examples with full kit are available at or marginally under retail from gray market sources. For anyone who has been waiting to enter the Rolex market without paying a premium, the Explorer 1 in 2026 is the most straightforward answer to that question. Moving to number 5. The Datejust 41 in steel and yellow gold, what the market calls the Rolls-Or configuration, is sitting in an interesting position right now. The two-tone aesthetic had a reputational dip during the period when sport watches dominated every conversation, and that dip left pricing on these references soft relative to the all-steel equivalents. That gap has not fully closed. The black dial Rolls-Or Datejust 41 on a Jubilee bracelet is one of the most versatile watches Rolex makes. It transitions between casual and formal contexts without effort. The yellow gold fluted bezel and center links read as intentionally dressed without being precious about it. The movement is the same caliber running in the sport references. The case finishing is the same quality. What is different is the price, which on the gray market sits below the all-steel sport references that objectively offer less versatility for someone who actually wears a watch across different situations. The buyers who have been sleeping on the two-tone Datejust are the ones who made decisions based on forum consensus, rather than what the watch actually is. The honest truth is that forum consensus in the watch community tends to lag about 3 to 4 years behind where the market actually moves. Two-tone was considered unfashionable for a long time. The pricing reflects that. The value is real, and the window to buy at these levels will not stay open indefinitely as the aesthetic cycle turns back toward dressed references. Number 4. The Sea Dweller 43, reference 126600, does not get the attention of the Submariner and does not get the prestige of the Deep Sea, which means it exists in a pricing gap that benefits the buyer significantly. The single red Sea Dweller is a 43mm steel watch with a ceramic bezel, a 2,000-foot water resistance rating, a helium escape valve, a manufacturer movement, and a case profile that wears larger than the 41mm Submariner in a way that reads as a serious tool watch. The movement architecture is the same generation as the current Submariner. The bracelet is the same oyster. The finishing is identical in quality. On the gray market, the Sea Dweller trades at a meaningful discount to the Submariner date, despite being a technically superior diving instrument. The reason is entirely about the perception gap. The Submariner has 50 years of cultural presence, and the Sea Dweller does not. There is no functional argument for why one should cost significantly more than the other. For a buyer choosing based on what the watch actually is, rather than what it represents in the broader conversation, that perception gap is a real buying opportunity. These are available below retail without difficulty right now, which is something that cannot be said for most references worth discussing. Number 3. The GMT-Master II in the Batman configuration, with a black and blue ceramic bezel on a Jubilee bracelet, is worth discussing carefully. The market for this reference has corrected significantly from its peak, and that correction has overshot in a way that creates genuine value. At the height of the gray market premium cycle, the Batman on Jubilee was trading at multiples of retail. Those premiums have compressed dramatically. The watch is now available in the gray market at figures that represent a much more rational relationship to the retail price. Still a premium, but a premium that reflects scarcity of a genuinely desirable reference rather than the speculative inflation that drove the earlier peaks. The Batman is a legitimate two-tone ceramic bezel GMT with Rolex's current generation movement. The Jubilee bracelet configuration is the more sought-after variant, and the market for it is deep enough that liquidity is not a concern if circumstances change. Buying a watch with a compressed premium in a market that is stabilized is a different proposition than buying the same watch at peak speculation. The Batman in 2026 is closer to the former than the latter. Number 2. The Sky Dweller in steel on an oyster bracelet is the value conversation that does not get nearly enough attention. The retail price on this reference is above $30,000, which pushes it outside the consideration set for a significant portion of the market. On the gray market, it is available at or below retail, in some cases meaningfully below, which creates a situation where a buyer is acquiring one of the most mechanically complex watches Rolex manufactures at a price that does not reflect that complexity. The Sky Dweller movement contains an annual calendar complication, which distinguishes between months of 30 days and months of 31 days automatically, and requires a single manual correction only in February. It also has a GMT function displayed through an independent 24-hour disc. The case has a larger 42mm profile. The construction quality is identical to every other current Rolex reference. The movement is manufactured in-house. Comparable complication levels from other Swiss manufacturers at this price point, or frankly at prices significantly above this point, do not offer the same level of case quality, finishing, or manufacturer support infrastructure. The Sky Dweller in steel is underpriced relative to what it is. The gray market agrees. Availability is not the constraint that keeps buyers away. The price point and lesser brand recognition compared to the Submariner and GMT are the constraints. For buyers operating above that threshold, the case is about as clear as it gets in the current market. If this kind of breakdown helps with decisions like this, subscribing to the channel genuinely helps keep this content going. Number 1. The Daytona in steel, reference 126500LN, is the obvious answer and the honest answer, and it is worth explaining why it earns that position rather than just stating it. The steel Daytona remains one of the most difficult references to acquire from an authorized dealer. The wait lists are real, the purchasing history requirements are real, and the allocation process that dealers use to manage scarce references is not transparent or predictable for most buyers. Gray market availability exists, but at premiums that are significant relative to retail. The premium has compressed from its absolute peak, but remains meaningful. The case for buying the steel Daytona at a gray market premium in 2026 comes down to a specific calculation. The watch is not getting easier to get from authorized channels. The movement is the manufacturer chronograph caliber that Rolex developed specifically for this reference. The case profile at 40mm is optimal for the chronograph function, large enough for the subdials to be readable, and compact enough to wear comfortably across situations. The white dial on black ceramic bezel configuration that the market calls the Panda is the most sought-after variant and the most liquid on resale. A buyer who waits for authorized dealer access and never gets it has spent years without the watch. A buyer who pays a gray market premium and holds the watch has owned it during that period and can sell at market if needed. The liquidity of the steel Daytona is high enough that the gray market premium functions less like a cost and more like a deposit, recoverable if circumstances change, and reasonable to absorb if they do not. The other thing worth saying about the Daytona that does not come up enough is that the wearing experience justifies the watch independent of the financial argument. The chronograph pushers on the current reference are the best they have ever been on this model. The dial legibility is excellent. The 40mm case wears correctly for the function. It is not a watch that requires justification based on investment logic. It is a watch that earns its position on the wrist on its own terms and happens to also make financial sense at current gray market levels. That combination, desirable to wear, liquid on resale, and compressed premium relative to peak, is what earns the #1 position. 6 references, each one in a position where the value case is real rather than speculative. The Explorer I124270 is the entry point for the buyer entering the market who does not want to overpay. The two-tone Datejust is ideal for the buyer that forum consensus has been steering away from, but it is something genuinely good. The Sea Dweller is for the buyer who wants the engineering without the narrative premium. The GMT-Master II Batman on Jubilee is for the buyer who recognizes a corrected market when the data shows one. The Sky Dweller is for the buyer whose budget reaches something that is genuinely underpriced for what it is. And the Steel Daytona is for the buyer who understands liquidity and makes decisions on full information rather than waiting for an authorized dealer allocation that may never come. The gray market in 2026 rewards buyers who do the work. The conventional wisdom is always a step behind where the market actually is. If this helped, subscribing to the channel is appreciated. It is the best way to support this kind of content.